I'm Simon Beaumont, and this is Jason Featherby from Knight Financial. We're talking superannuation in this podcast, and in particular, a tricky part of superannuation about when you die or when you pass away. Jason, who's allowed to get your superannuation when you die?
Well, firstly, you're right. It's not something that a lot of people do think about or even want to think about, facing their own mortality, but it is an important part of a financial plan and having super. And in terms of who can get your super when you die, well, it's either a dependent, so someone who is dependent on you financially, a spouse, a child, or someone else that you support. Or if you don't have anyone under that banner, then it is your legal personal representative that will get your super, essentially your executor, and they'll decide who gets it via your will.
So just drill down on that a little bit. How do we ensure the right person receives your super?
Yeah, and again, an important consideration in any estate plan, the best way to ensure that the right person gets your super is to make a nomination. And you do that by contacting your advisor or your super provider, filling out a nomination form. There are two types. You can make a binding nomination, which essentially makes sure that the trustee pays your super to who you want it to go to and doesn't give the trustee any discretion. The other option you have is to make a non-binding nomination, which guides the trustee as to who you'd like to receive your super, but is not binding on them. The trustee will still go through their process. They'll have a look at who your beneficiaries might be. They'll be guided by that nomination, but not compelled to use it.
So Jason, the recipient of our superannuation, will they have to pay tax, and how do you minimise or optimise that payment?
It's important to know that if your super ends up in a dependent's hands upon your death, there is never any tax to pay. It's only when your super is left upon your death to a non-dependent, so like an adult child, where they may have to pay some tax. And so every super fund is made up of two components. There's a tax-free component and a taxable component. The taxable component upon your death in a non-dependent's hands is taxed. So it is important to try and minimise this tax while we can. If you are between 60 and 67 years of age, you have the ability to draw out money from your super tax-free and put it back in as a non-concessional contribution. And by doing that, you're washing out that taxable component and increasing the tax-free component.
So what happens in the situation where someone passes away suddenly?
Well, this is going to sound really pretty awful, but if you can try and avoid dying suddenly and die a little slower, then you do have time to plan. And as we've said before, if you are sick, it might be best to take all your money out of super, because you can access your super tax-free, put it in a bank account, and then ultimately will get passed to your dependents tax-free through your estate. If you die suddenly and you've got a taxable component in your super, and you've got no dependents to leave that money to, then there's not much you can do to avoid them paying tax on your death.
A number of our podcasts are about superannuation, but in particular here we're talking about estate planning, and a good financial planner will have the ability, or a superannuation expert under their roof, to talk to you about this. It's an important conversation to have.
It's an important conversation. It's one that's often not dealt with or overlooked because it's a tough conversation to have. A good planner will deal with it as part of the full financial plan.